Okay, so we can have a look at this house we're coming to see for draft proofing. Already we can see that there's an oriel window with a window board on it, probably with no insulation underneath there, that one on the bedroom above the front door, and that's a little bit worrying. We can see they've got replacement UPVC windows. They're like to be quite good, although we find problems with hinges and they're sometimes draughty as well. See on the roof a Velux window, we worry about them for draughty on their draft strip. Otherwise it's a fairly solidly built house, and we can see they've got a very nice bay window upstairs, and I'm worried about that one having no insulation in it, but we'll see when we get upstairs if they've got insulation. We don't do insulation on Draughtbusters, we give people some suggestions about what they should do. So let's go inside and have a look and see what's inside the house. We're looking at the front door and we're going to have a look. We can see there's an air brick under that front door, and I'm going to give it a little poke because I think it's full of stuff and it shouldn't be. Underneath the door you've got a crack that's between the sill and the brickwork. It's very difficult to see that crack. I'll put my screwdriver in it and you might see it probably go. You see this crack, and I'm worrying about that crack. We'll look at that in a second when we go inside, and then we have a bit more of a look. I like this to be clear so it's got ventilation underneath the floor, and I don't like all that cobwebs and stuff in there. It's not too bad, but we still like clear ventilation. It's important to be ventilated under the floor. And we'll look just here as well in the porch ceiling. We can see this ceiling up above the porch is outdoors, and so this can be very cold underneath the floor of the bedroom. And I'll take the doormat up here. We'll have a look and we can see they've got some packers here, so the door is packed up off the floor, and that gap there is going straight to outside. So we worry about a draft coming in there. We'll be sealing that later. Right across here, between the floorboards, there should be tongues and grooves. And this is sitting down, but you can see drafts are blowing up by the line on the back there. That's it for the front door now. Very happy to see a very nice front door here. We can see it's got double lines of draft strips. It's got a nice letter plate flap, which is sealed and lovely. When the door shuts, it all goes quiet outside, so we know it's nicely draft sealed. The handle lifts up and brings everything into the strips. It's such a shame that there's a draft underneath a very expensive door like that. I think you might want to stand in there. So these are quite old double glazed windows, but we like them, and it's quiet when we're in the house. If I open them, we get a lot of noise coming in, and we tend to get a bit of bowing up this side where the window frame is bowing away from the sash and a gap in the middle with a draft. But on this one we can see they've got these special cams which help close the window, and we'll have a look at a different one later. This window, I'm not worried about it. It's a little bit stiff, it needs oiling. We'll immediately look at the one on the opposite side of the bay window, and if you look carefully you can see a gap here. You can see past the draft strip into the frame, and we don't like that. When I open it, we're going to see that there's a cam on this part of the window, but there's no matching piece on the frame, and so that cam is doing nothing and leaving the window open. There's a lot of grot up and down there. They really need to be cleaned out.
And this dirt is also...
This dirt is indicative of drafts coming in there and room for spiders to get in, all that stuff. And we don't like them, especially if this is doing a draft coming in. So they need to buy a new cam for this window to get that to close against this draft strip. And there's another one here as well. There's a little gap in this draft strip where I've got my finger. You can see that gap, and that will be letting in a draft even if everything else was sealed up. We're going to have a look at the open fire here. We worry about these open fires because they can be straight open up the chimney flue, and we get a thermal chimney effect where warm air is sucked out of the house and taken up the chimney all the time. You don't feel a draft, but you lose a lot of heat and hot air. And when we look up this one, it's quite a good one. There's a flap here which is closing off the chimney, so we've got some kind of control over the drafts that are going on. And I really like that flap, and it's doing a very good job. If it wasn't there, we'd be putting an old pillow inside a plastic bag. The next door we've got is going to be the back door, where we're going to have a little look and see. It's quite a nice back door. It's a little bit loose on the hand. It's got a multi-point locking system with hook bolts and everything. Shut that up and close it, and then we worry this side of the door. We've got some gaps here where there's missing plaster, and so air can come round the back of the frame and out here. And so later we'll be sealing down there with some painter's mate, some decorator's caulk to fill that in nicely. And then if we look at the bottom of the door over this side, somebody's removed the skirting board. Here we've got a gap between the end of the floorboard and the floor, and we've got a gap here that goes right down to under the floor, which is letting in a draft. The big problem with that one is not so much here, but it goes right behind all their kitchen units, and we worry about that. Downstairs cloakroom here. A very old window which we understand is sealed shut, but the fan here is nice, the fan, and it comes on and it blows out. The problem with it is that when it's switched off, it's going to take a few minutes to go off now, it continues to allow air to flow in and out of the room. It's good for ventilation but bad for heat loss. So again we have beautiful double glazed patio doors. These have got trickle ventilators on them, which are the bane of Draughtbusters' lives. These things are designed so you can put them half open or fully open, and that allows ventilation into the room. In the summer you can have them open all the time. My problem with them is that when they're closed, they're still draughty, which is exactly what you do with the door. But underneath this sill, we've got that same business. It's sat up, the blue thing is a packer, and then there's a crack between the sill and the brickwork mortar. And I will silicone across there with clear silicone and seal that gap on the outside, and then we worry about what's happening on the inside. And we can have a look. In this case, the trim at the bottom of the door is broken, and we can see there's a gap down here. It's all full of dusty stuff, and that gap is joined to outside, so we're going to be sealing across this gap and sticking this trim back on again to make it all nice and draft proof. We'll have a little look in the bottom corner there. You can see there's some evidence of a little bit of mould and something a little bit damp there. So we suspect that area is very cold, and possibly the coldest place in the house. And so that's where condensation goes to. It's a very bad problem, that, and it's best to keep a nice lot of ventilation there and keep the mould clean with some anti-mould spray or bleach and water or something to keep that mould away, because it's quite hazardous stuff. So we're going to have a look at these skylight windows. We call them Velux windows. It's a trade name and a trademark. And on here we have a spongy strip on that, and we're finding that a lot of those spongy strips have decayed and fallen off, and when that window is closed they allow a draft to come in. I'm going to close this window. Normally there's a proprietary pole, but this customer has just a normal pole. Give it a good push shut, and then we can close that bar up. That's ventilate, and that's fully closed, and that's why that strip is there, to keep it draft free when it's closed, which is what it is, closed, draft free. So we have a very nice master bedroom in here with a beautiful bay window. We worry about the bay window. If you looked outside when we first came, it's tile hung, and it's probably a timber frame across the bottom there, and no insulation at all in it. I'm recommending to the customer that they take panels of insulation, probably 80mm thick, and go on each facet of that window and fit a new wide window board around it to get themselves warm. The ceiling of this bay window has got a small gable on top of it, and we'll see later that it's almost completely inaccessible. I would like them to insulate that flat bay window roof, because it's quite a big area and it's probably very cold. I'm a little bit surprised that there's no mould on it because it's so exposed, but probably the room stays warm enough and it's well enough ventilated and air's circulating nicely. We've looked at the windows in other places. We can have a look at these ones, and I'll demonstrate for you, not with that one, with this one, how we go. The window comes closed, fully shut, and then the handle goes down. Let the handle up and give it a little press open, put the handle down again, and now I've got a ventilate position for that window. And for me this is much better than a trickle ventilator. It's doing a ventilate job, it's secure, and it's very easy, and you can see that it's done. Close it again. We watch in these windows for the corners of the strips that go round the glass. They can sometimes pull back and leave little gaps, which we haven't got any of on these, but we do find them. We fill in the corner. There's a tiny hole here where a small draft will be entering. Yes. We're coming into the bathroom now. We're going to see a few nightmares in here. There's some quite nice artwork on the wall where things have been leaking and left a very big mess of plaster falling off and hard water crustation on there. If we look upwards we can see a hole right through, probably a bird's nest there, and that's straight through to outside, And further up here we've got holes round the pipes, and I hate them as well. The pipes should probably be insulated when they're going into the loft, but the hole is horrible because that's letting a draught in and out, and it's in the airing cupboard. The bathroom would be warmer without that draught. This house was probably built in the 1960s, 1950s, and we have an air vent here which is permanently open. If you turn the light out, you'll be able to see daylight out through that thing. I'd much rather that they used the window for ventilation and we sealed that up, and indeed that's what we'd be doing. I'd like to see them take it off, fill it up with fiberglass and foam or anything inside there that insulates and seals. We're now in the room above the front door where we saw that lovely oriel window, and the window sill board there is quite cold. I'm worried about the ceiling of it being cold. The window itself is very nicely draft sealed, but we worry about down the edge of the window. We can see some gaps and cracks here, probably where drafts are coming in, and we'll be sealing them up later with some acrylic sealant. And I've already shown you how the windows work, but we have in this room, we have a vent. This one remarkably still works, so we can open and close it, except when it's closed it's still drafty, so we're going to seal that one up so it's no longer drafty. So we're in the top floor bedroom now, and we're going to look at the cold water tanks. They've got 2 in this cupboard, and we're seeing quite a few good things in this cupboard. We've got an insulation panel on the back of the door, which is very good to have insulation on the door. The thing that's missing, unfortunately, is there's no draft strips. You can see all this dust here that I'm just touching. It falls off, and that's been collecting there as wind blows in from outside, and that would have been making the bedroom cold. We don't really do insulation as part of Draughtbusters, but these pipes should all be insulated. You shouldn't be able to see any copper, and this one's the overflow pipe. It should also be insulated. They've got some spare insulation here so they could do it. And when we look down below the tanks, we can almost see down to the ceiling down there without any insulation. That should all be completely full. So we can see some daylight coming in. We don't worry about daylight, and we love ventilation in the loft because it's taking away any problems or condensation. And a lot of people think it's nice to have felt. It lets a bit of dirt in without the sarking felt there, but we like the ventilation, so I'm saying to them, don't re-roof. So we worry about these type of downlighters because they can easily be drafty right round where the luminary goes in, and also they can be breaking the insulation barrier up there. This one for me doesn't look particularly drafty, but I hate downlighters and I worry about them being drafty. Very nice window up here. Again, we've got trickle ventilator on it, and we like them, but we worry about them being drafty and closed. The whole thing moves, and so it's very difficult to say that's not drafty. I've probably got a draft coming in below here, and when the window's shut, there's almost certainly a draft coming in above the top of there. You can see it's somebody's siliconed it, so there probably was a draft and they've tried to stop it. Got a little bit of shrinkage on the glazing strips that go around this window right in this corner. The both glazing strips are shrunk back, and so there's a hole going in there, and that hole will be drafty because the area underneath the glass is a ventilated area. Normally we have some black silicone to fill this gap in, but ideally new rubber strips, but stopgap measure is to fill that in with possibly black or clear silicone, and we will be doing that before we go because I can feel a draft coming in there now. When we've looked around somebody's house for Draughtbusters, we usually sit down with the customer and explain to them some of the things we found. So we found some gaps underneath the door, the front door, the back door and the patio door, and we'd like to seal those in with some sealant so there's no longer a draft. We'd seal outside with silicone, inside probably with acrylic sealant, and then we'd make it all look nice and tidy when we've done. We have upstairs, we have some ventilator grills which are open, and we like to seal them up with acrylic sealant so they're closed forever because the windows will do the ventilation now. And we've seen 1 or 2 cracks up the side of a door down here, the back door, and some cracks in the bedroom upstairs where we'd like to go down with acrylic sealant, possibly some on top of a bedroom window as well. And they're very minor sealant, more like decorating than draft proofing, but I worry about the gaps and I don't like leaving my customers with drafts after I've gone. There's a few insulation issues that we've pointed out to the customer, but Draughtbusters don't do insulation. We can suggest that you maybe need to do some here and there or wherever, and leave it for the customer to sort that out. This house is not too bad for drafts, but there are some, and I would say in my guesstimating that probably the drafts that we're going to seal up today will save something between £20 and £50 a year. So, and they're only going to take 20 minutes to sort out. It's a very good return on investment.
Great.
Yeah, lovely. Good, so I'm going to get on and do